Hi everybody, hello Dr. Rutger Vos. How are you doing, Rutger?
I'm pretty good. I got the sniffles a little bit, so I sound a bit nasal, but I always do, so it's probably fine.
Yeah. What's the difference? So this is just another podcast like any other.
Yep.
But today, sorry, but today we have a very special topic in our science videos. We're doing science in movies, the jungle in movies.
Jungle movies.
The jungle is not just a region on Earth with its own climate and habitat and flora and fauna and all that kind of shit.
Fiona! Oh, I'm so happy I found you!
There's something about the jungle that sparks our imagination, whether for good and whether for bad, and we're going to explore that too, along with the science and along with a little bit of history, human history, with the jungle. And it's going to be a blast.
Yeah, the jungle is a bunch of different things. The jungle is the older term for what we now call the tropical rainforest. And then the tropics are sort of this area around the equator.
Mm-hmm.
So this is always an area with a lot of rainfall and with parts of the year where the sun is directly overhead, which is not outside the tropics.
Yes. And you have different seasons there. Everything is different there.
Well, in some ways, it's the part of the world where there's no seasons, almost. At least there's much less seasonality than elsewhere in the more temperate or Arctic zones.
Yeah, it's like rainy or dry, and even the dry, is it really dry?
The drier zones are actually a bit further away from the equator. So if you travel from the equator towards the poles, there's first the wet part, and then there's like the deserts, right? So like the Sahara or the Kalahari and so on. And beyond that, it becomes kind of subtropical, Mediterranean, temperate, and then Arctic.
So I find this topic of the jungle fascinating, and I want to start off by the image of the jungle, through the image of the jungle. And it's actually, there's something, a very recent reference for people here living in Israel. So I live in Tel Aviv. No jungles here in the Middle East. We're like 30 degrees above the equator. But just the other day, there was this interview with a politician, right-wing politician, who echoed something that previous prime minister, left of center, said a while back. He said, Israel is a villa in the jungle. That's kind of a theme that some nationalists / racists say, whatever you decide. We are a villa in the jungle. And then this image, even though we have no jungle here, no jungle in Jewish lore or anything, still this image of this dangerous, barbaric, crazy, lawless place where civilization cannot enter. We are barred from entry. This is the only region on Earth that is so teeming with life, but still it's away from our grasp in terms of what we usually do: come in, conquer, subjugate, decide how everything works. But the jungle, this is a whole different animal.
Savage lands outside of the reach of civilization, and outside of enlightened law, but more, the law of the jungle applies.
Exactly. So the movies that are there that we're going to talk through about the jungle. We have 5 movies. This is going to be a special podcast. First, we have the jungle on Pandora. The Pandoran jungle, the Na'vi there in the movie Avatar. So we're going to start with a fictional jungle just to set the stage about the jungle in our minds rather than the actual jungle.
Uh-huh.
Then after that, we're going to go to Apocalypto, the Mel Gibson movie about the Native Americans in Mexico just before the Spanish came over to kill them all.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to go to Tarzan, the latest Tarzan, the Legend of Tarzan from 2016.
Yep.
With Skarsgård. He's the Tarzan there.
And Christoph Waltz.
And that's in Africa. And he's, right, Tarzan, he's like royalty, both royalty, civilized, refined, and a barbarian slash an incredible specimen of the jungle. This is also the romanticized version of the jungle. After that, we're going to go to India, the Jungle Book. Mostly not the animated one, the CGI one. What the Indian jungle is like. And then we're going to cap it all off with Apocalypto Now, the Southeast Asian jungle. The psychedelic, crazy jungle of our own minds, maybe. But first, you know what? First, let me give a shout out to a couple of patrons. I want to give today a shout out to Aisha Smith, patron Aisha Smith. Hi, Aisha. How are you doing? And Alexandra Balan. Alexandra is actually, I know her. We were pen pals for a time. She's a very gifted illustrator. I want to start giving some shout outs to patrons. So thank you, Alexandra and Aisha. And if you want to support the channel, you can go to patreon.com/GothAcademy to help us keep going. Or you can go to paypal.com/GilKid for a one-time donation if you feel like it. But now let's get to it. Jungle in Movies, another science edition.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
It's going airborne.
Well, we used to look up in the sky and wonder at our place in the stars.
For our first movie, we are taken to a fictional jungle, but it really has all the trappings and all of the conflicts that we see in the real jungles. So in this case, already to make it clear that the jungle is full of different dangers and threats and problems, the place is called Pandora.
You are not in Kansas anymore. You are on Pandora.
Very subtle. Very subtle.
Oh, it's all very, very subtle. So this is a jungle on a different planet. But nonetheless, it needs to be colonized because there is a very precious mineral there, which is also the case in the real tropics.
What's it called?
Because they're not very good at picking names, they call the planet Pandora and they call the mineral
unobtainium.
Yeah. Unironically.
Yes, yeah, exactly. They mean it seriously even. Yeah.
So it's not an accident that this jungle is on another planet. Right, this is sometimes how we feel that the jungle is like a different, and it's going to be a recurring theme in all these movies.
Yeah, the colonizers and or the colonized are basically aliens to each other, space aliens. Yeah. Avatar is the classic story of the white savior in the jungle, of colonizers showing up and coming into contact with wild nature, with very scary, dangerous animals that can jump you all of a sudden, because in the jungle you can't look very far. So just behind the first layer of vegetation, there could be some scary hammerhead rhino or whatever that just jumps at you.
Yeah.
Don't shoot, you'll piss him off.
It's already pissed off.
Jake, that armor's too thick. Trust me.
And of course there is native people who in most of these movies are noble savages.
We have an indigenous population of humanoids called the Na'vi. They're fond of arrows dipped in a neurotoxin that'll stop your heart in 1 minute. And they have bones reinforced with naturally occurring carbon fiber. They are very hard to kill.
They have only redeeming qualities. They are perfect. They're very nice. They have a different skin color, but it is a bit more comfortable to make it a skin color that doesn't actually occur on Earth. Otherwise, we'd really have to interrogate actual conflicts.
Yeah, and also like a mix of cultures.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. It's like they look a little bit Native American, but also African, so you can't really pinpoint the whole thing.
Yes, yeah.
And the colonizers are not like Americans per se. They don't say that they're Americans. So you can root against yourself and your own history. You can root for the Native Americans and against and for the death and destruction of the American soldiers without feeling too guilty, because it's not about you. It's somewhere far away.
Yes. Yeah, it's the conflict is all very comfortable in the sense that both sides are kind of far away, and you can identify with the other side. And in fact, you can identify more so with the other side than ever in reality, because you can even become the other side through
these remotely controlled bodies called avatars.
Yeah, they didn't explain that. They're just like, this is the premise, that this is possible.
Well, they explain it a little bit. So they have these sort of hybrids of the other race, except they have some of the genetics of humans, so much so that you can actually kind of log in on the nervous system of your avatar. And so then you can steer that body and move it around. And this is also why the main character had to be the twin of the other guy that died, because then they're genetically identical, so they are compatible with the system that's being presented here.
Yeah. I meant like scientifically viable, but it's also, now that I think a bit about like the final battle between the avatar of the protagonist and the bad American general, also inside a different body, a mechanical body. So this is to represent, like, again, the battle between the progress and nature, the natural, the good, the connection with nature, and civilization with all its faults. And there's in the beginning, like, this general gives a speech. He says,
"Out there beyond that fence, every living thing that crawls, flies, or squats in the mud wants to kill you and eat your eyes for jujubes.
On my face from my first day, blah, blah, blah." So again, this is the way that the West, for lack of a better term right now, views the jungle. So we have two flips of the coin, right? On the one hand is just like the most dangerous thing, and on the other hand is the most magical thing. But I wanted to ask you something about Avatar. So we see these Na'vi control the animals through their magic, braid, and then connect with the animal, and then tell the animal what to do. So this could look like domestication, basically.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Aren't animals in the jungle less likely to be domesticated than animals that live in other? It is like a very, very specific evolutionary trait that these animals evolved to have the ability to be domesticated by the Na'vi.
Yeah.
What do you think?
The trick in the movie is that basically every living thing has like a socket that you can plug into, and they can all communicate in some sort of organic internet where they exchange ideas.
The USB.
And this is, I think, what it's supposed to represent is basically the opposite of domestication. Actually, it's supposed to represent that those people, or the Na'vi, are more in touch with nature, as opposed to the animals being more pre-adapted to be domesticable, right? So actually, we have these noble savages, which are closer to nature and more in tune with the vibes of everything that's living around them, and they can just communicate with that more easily because they are more noble savages, wild people.
But they have to make the animal listen. But in order to make the animal listen, they have to beat the animal and dominate it. I want to get that in there. Okay, now you have to do what I tell you.
Yeah, but that's always where you plug something in. Like where you plug in USB, you probably have to do it 2 or 3 times in different arrays before it works. And this is just how sockets work. That's just kind of.
Okay. But what about domestication? Actual domestication of animals in the jungle, like civilizations living in the jungle? What animals did they domesticate?
There's very little domestication of animals really in the jungle. Probably because those animals are just not really amenable to domestication. Like maybe you can tame some animals, but really to domesticate them so that we actually can take over a whole group of these animals and start breeding them, they'd probably have to come out of different ecosystems with maybe a bit less predation pressure, so they're less skittish and less likely to run away. They would have to be in an environment where you can actually form slightly larger social groups so that we as humans can take over the herd, and it's somewhat less likely to occur really inside the jungle. So actually on Avatar, the main domesticated animals are more also the ones from the plains, right? There's like the sort of the plains Indians on horseback, and they're actually so not from the rainforest, but from a different ecosystem.
Right. Only the birds. Can you domesticate to like they domesticate? There's like dragons, like, and actually there's like this scene right when he goes down, where it comes down with the dragon. This is like Daenerys,
totally,
giving a speech right to the Dothraki. But domesticating birds, is that something that like except pigeons,
chickens, sure, geese, turkeys,
chickens, right? But like birds that actually fly. Very high up, like eagles. You can domesticate eagles a little bit. Okay,
sure. Yeah, there's like the hunting, eagles,
right? Hawks and stuff.
The hawks, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So one thing, like you mentioned, the exoskeleton a bit earlier, and I think it's true that one part of that is that they're both in some way avatars. Right, so they're sort of projections into a different body. But this movie also really references the movie Aliens in a lot of different ways.
Yep.
So there's the exoskeleton. There's also, of course, Sigourney Weaver in there. There's also like the really rough Latina woman in the tank top who is like a fierce fighter.
Hey, Vasquez. Have you ever been mistaken for a man?
No. Have you?
Oh, Vasquez.
And in some ways, this is basically the movie Aliens, but from the perspective of the aliens, right? So there's all of a sudden people come and intrude on their planet, and they have to fight them off, which is basically the premise of the movie Aliens as well.
Yeah, we're gonna elaborate on the people living in the jungle and in other places in our next history podcast, where we're gonna do indigenous peoples in movies, history in movies. There was also, I thought, a reference to Apocalypse Now, when they call their either the operation or the planes, they call it Valkyrie, which is like the name of the Wagner music. I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Yeah. So and that's both a reference then to the Wagner ring cycle, and then the Valkyries are these sort of the goddesses from Norse mythology who choose who gets to live and who gets to die. So it's kind of the capriciousness on the battlefield in both cases.
And what about the history of exploration of exploring the jungle? This is an economic, scientific, military expedition.
That's usually how it went. These sort of mixed expeditions where there's these, I guess when we're talking about the particular era where Europeans set out to explore the quote-unquote dark continents, and then there was sort of these mixed expeditions of partly scientific, like late or middle 19th century, like science expeditions, but also, well, let's look if there's any useful resources there. And let's look if there's any land grab that's going to be somewhat feasible. So all kind of combined and integrated.
This is why we're here. Unobtainium. Because this little gray rock sells for 20 million a kilo. That's the only reason. It's what pays for the whole party. It's what pays for your science. Comprendo? Now those savages are threatening our whole operation. We're on the brink of war, and you're supposed to be finding a diplomatic solution. So use what you've got and get me some results.
They try to give them civilization and stuff and teach them, but they just like mud. So, you can't teach these savages anything. But on the other hand, I didn't like the condescension in the Na'vi culture. She meets this guy, he's a human. Okay, so he comes from a different culture. Why does she call him a child that knows nothing? How would she like it if she came over here and we say, oh, you don't know how to log on to the internet? Oh, you're stupid. That's very racist.
Oh, and basically their culture, by the way, was really easy to break in on, because like apparently it was very, very rare and difficult to fly on the big dragon. He trains to be a Na'vi for a couple of weeks. He flies the dragon. He's just better at being Na'vi than the actual Na'vi. Actually, so that what that reminded me of? Like, okay, so he goes into the body of those other people. That reminded me of Rachel Dolezal. Remember the woman who was white, but then she led a chapter of the NAACP in Spokane, Washington, pretending to be black.
Yeah. Oh.
The savior.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I tried to watch a documentary about her, but I couldn't even bear a movie from her point of view. It was just
that was on
annoying.
Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah, on Netflix. And the reason that there is so much life in a relatively small area is because of the rain, right?
Just in general, the climate, because it's less seasonal and because there's less of a tough season, like a winter where there's less growing, things can grow sort of more luxuriously, vibrantly, nicely. And so that creates a lot of opportunity, and so there would be many different species there.
Okay. So let's move on to our first real jungle of Latin America, of Mexico. Let's go to Apocalypto.
Yeah.
So this movie is entirely in the Navi language, in the local language, and I was surprised. First of all, I was surprised by how boring Avatar was. Watching it at home without the 3D glasses, and you're nodding, so you're agreeing with me.
Yeah, I agree. How many cliches there are, condescending cliches there are in there.
But on the flip side, I was surprised by how good Apocalypto was. Okay, so it has its faults, and you have like a whole tribe of like really, really, really bad Native Americans who are just like very, very bad. Mm-hmm. But overall, I was I wanted to watch the whole movie nonstop, even though it's in a language that I don't know, and it's a very, very violent. But it was good. It was good.
It was good.
What did you think? Did you like it? Yeah,
I liked it. Yeah, I mean, it's a movie by Mel Gibson, so that's a little bit problematic. But Mel Gibson, he makes decent, watchable movies, I suppose.
Does he have a better movie than this one? Which movie?
Maybe not. No.
I'm trying to think about this one. And this was, I think, like his least successful of his like solo movies where he's directing and doing everything.
But critical reception was very positive, actually.
Mm-hmm. So it follows like a tribe of Native Americans. And there's the theme of how like you have the different factions. So at first, like the first 40 minutes, you have different factions in between this tribe. This one doesn't go like this one, the mother. Blah, blah. Then comes another tribe, just like, oh, you're all the same. Boom, let's kill everybody. And there's this whole war and chase and what you're gonna do in this crazy jungle. At the end, it doesn't even matter. You're all gonna die. Here are the Spanish. And you're all the same to them, you're all barbarians, so it's kind of retroactively make the whole drama unimportant, which I thought was an interesting... I would have preferred to be the last shot on the beach when they're coming, and that's it, and you don't know what's going on, because it doesn't matter what's going on, because, okay, this one gets to live, the other one gets to die, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Apocalypto takes place on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. So there parts of it take place in the jungle, and parts of it are in more settled, urbanized areas where the culture there is kind of representing the Maya culture, but a bit more brutal than they probably actually were in reality. All the executions that are happening are not to the same extent Maya, actually. And it's the jungle of the neotropics, which means that there's jaguars, there's tapirs, and there's somewhat different tree species and plants
and dogs. Is that actually the case? They have dogs there.
No, there were dogs in the New World. There's been domestication of dogs in the New World. I don't really know about Mexico specifically, but there's been.
But in the jungle, I don't know, it seemed a little bit weird, like a jungle dog.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe they brought him over from the city.
The jungle, which the main character lives in, the main character is called Jaguar Paw. That's his home. So that's not the scary, uncivilized place. That's just where he's comfortable. And that's where he also lays all his traps for the people chasing him. And the city for him is scary.
Yeah, the civilization is dangerous.
And actually the movie, in some ways, the movie is more like kind of like Die Hard or something, right? Like the jungle is like Nakatomi Plaza, Jaguar Paw is John McClane. And then when he finally traps Zero Wolf in the tapir trap, I'm sure he said,
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Yeah, he looked him in the eye. He was thinking.
Boom.
He was thinking it.
Yep.
Yeah. So the jungle there is not only like dangerous because of all the plants and stuff that can burn your testicles or just are gross in some other ways.
Just a prank, bro.
But it's also, yeah. But wow, they were going way too hard on these pranks. Getting this guy to put the leaves that burn his testicles off. Come on, that's not cool. That's
not cool at all.
That's crossed the line.
Yeah.
I was like, just butcher them all, other Native Americans over there.
Fuck you! You just got pranked!
But then it's also dangerous because you can be taken just like that as a slave. Even before the slave trade comes in, there's the local slave trade.
Yep.
That they have. Actually, I don't know if you call it slave, but you just like, just to kill you, because of God, whatever.
Well, I think there were different classes, right? So the Mayas kind of captured the people in the jungle, some of whom were to be sacrificed. But on the way to the place where the sacrifices happen, you can see that there's also just people working as slaves in the mines and in construction and on the farms.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So the message of the movie is kind of like, this is the way of the world.
Yeah.
The white Europeans are not worse than other people. It's just when you have power, you abuse power and you do horrible things. And maybe this is not in the movie. Maybe the reason that the Europeans were the worst is because they had the ability to be worse and to do worse things at that particular time. And I guess this is I don't mind this message at all.
I think it's an accurate message. Like, people are colonizers of other people weaker than them. I mean, I understand that that's kind of a cop-out for me to say that as a European, but that's what history kind of shows, right? Just in general, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And if some things would have gone the other way, some arbitrary accidental things, then you would have been colonized by someone else, whatever, not you, whatever, Europeans. So we also saw there, like, we saw a panther. Was it jaguar or a panther?
I thought it was jaguar.
And also a lot of snakes.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of poisonous stuff. So this again goes to what you mentioned earlier about, because there's so many animals and plants, then you're going to have a lot of applications, useful applications, and all kinds of variety.
Yeah. In one scene, you can see Jaguar Paw trapping this tree frog, which is very brightly colored, because that's, of course, a signal. Watch out, I'm very poisonous. And then he uses the frog to poison his darts. And then he makes this impromptu kind of blowpipe to take out one of the people chasing him.
Anyways, let's go to the Jungle Book.
No, Tarzan first,
the African... Tarzan? You wanted to go to Tarzan first? Okay, let's go to the Tarzan first.
Okay, let's get this thing over with. I know you hated the Tarzan movie.
Oh, I forgot that I hated it.
And there are maybe some things to hate about it, but the movie says a couple of things that are important to know, I guess, or it makes some references. It makes references to the colonization of the Congo, which was a horrific story, essentially. And we mentioned a little bit earlier this phenomenon of these late 19th century expeditions, which are half commercial, half colonizing. And in this movie, there's some reference being made to that. So very early in the movie, we meet this Chief Mbonga, who is actually played by Jimon Hunsu. And then what's being said is,
Chief Mbonga, I presume?
And that's a reference to a kind of an important event where Stanley, one of the explorers, went into the jungle to find David Livingstone, and eventually he finds him, and then let's quote a little bit. So,
okay, that's in the movie, or that's the story behind it?
That's the story behind it. So Stanley was kind of an explorer working for the New York Herald, and he was going to find David Livingstone, who had been disappeared in deep dark Africa, quote unquote. And then he reports that he finds him, and he says, preserving a calmness of exterior before the Arabs, because there was also Arabs there, so it's not real exploration, before the Arabs, which was hard to simulate as he reached the group, Mr. Stanley said, Dr. Livingstone, I presume. A smile lit up the features of the pale white man as he answered, yes, and I feel thankful that I'm here to welcome you. And this is a famous moment in the history of white people kind of exploring the Congo. And it was part of Stanley's missions, which eventually he started doing for King Leopold II of Belgium. So he was kind of the point man for the colonization of the Congo as a personal fief of the King of the Belgians. And so eventually it became the Congo Free State, and under King Leopold II, by some estimate, like 10 million Congolese died.
Oh no, really? 10 million?
Something like that, yeah.
Wow.
November 24th, 1964. 5 months after Chombe takes over Stanleyville, the rebels' capital is captured by American-transported Belgian paratroopers and by American-supplied white mercenaries. The city is littered with unburied, rotting corpses. Here in the Congo, these new atrocities have old roots. Half a century ago, the white colonials used to cut off the hands of the blacks who didn't work fast enough. During that period, so much killing and torture was so cruelly and persistently practiced that the black population decreased from 20 million to 12, and now we reap what we have sown.
That was kind of the beginning of the extraction of natural wealth out of the Congo. First ivory, then diamonds, and this is still going on, right?
98% of these mines are brutally controlled by rebel militias, relying on a system of forced labor that amounts to modern slavery. There's much at stake for the rebels. It's not just gold in the jungle, but cassiterite and coltan, rare earth minerals vital to the functioning of our computers and mobile phones.
So that was, I thought, important to show in this movie. And then the rest of this is basically the same plot as Avatar, right? There's a white man, and he goes native, and then he's actually more in touch even with nature than the people there. And then he frees them. He's the savior.
Yeah.
We've seen
because he has both the native side and the white side, right? So that makes him better than
exactly.
Than
he brings
others.
his extra skills of civilization and higher knowledge into the jungle, which just empowers him even more. Which is a very colonial story, you know.
I was going to say that it sounds scientifically sound, but okay, colonial, whatever.
But one more thing to say about this, I think we could probably move on quite quickly, but there's just a couple of things that need to be hammered in the ground here. So one is the colonization of the Congo and the stories to justify that and the people behind it. Another thing to point out is that even at the time, it started to become kind of clear to a lot of people that this was actually too brutal, right? So King Leopold II was being criticized for that, and eventually the Belgian government, the state, took over and took this fiefdom from him because it was just getting out of hand. And one of the things that was instrumental in this was a book that basically showed the savagery of the Europeans going into the jungle there, and that's the book Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad.
Okay.
And
who's Joseph Conrad?
He's a writer, and he tells the story of there being an ivory trader called Kurtz, who somewhere inside the jungle of the Congo just way oversteps the bounds of what civilized quote unquote people are supposed to do. and then eventually he's stopped essentially. And that story, Joseph Conrad wrote that story basically as kind of a metaphor for what was happening there in the Congo. And that story became also the basis for the movie Apocalypse Now, which is based on that same book.
Curse.
Right, so the savagery of the Europeans going into the jungle and just looking to become basically worshipped like gods because they bring their extra power or technology or whatever in there and just go native in a negative way. That's a theme that actually is in this movie and in that book and also in Apocalypse Now.
Tarzan, we didn't say, it's not just Skarsgård, it's also Christoph Waltz and Samuel L. Jackson. I was like, how come I never heard of this movie? Because it sucks. That's the reason. But Sam Jackson is there just to be like the black guy who is less African than the white guy, I think.
Yeah, that's true. But I thought Christoph Waltz, like, I like him in every movie, and I thought he was also by far the best character in this movie. Actually, the only memorable character in any case.
Definitely. So apparently, like a lot of nature, a lot of dangers, no civilization there to ground you. This is a dangerous recipe for people. We need the structure of our society in order to keep us together, keep ourselves together, like in our own minds.
Yeah. But it's also, on the flip side, it's kind of like a playground where you can play out these, what if the normal rules of civilization no longer apply? What are you then capable of? Then you can be like a god, right? And so that psychology is also explored. And it in some ways it's very appealing also to the writers of the time that actually all of these stories were written. That there is this world where, the normal rules of like liberal democratic society, which was just starting to form, don't apply. Instead, there's the law of the jungle, which is kind of like a might makes right kind of thing. And isn't that great? It's like a lot of these writers, I mean, they would have been cancelled right away if they were around right now, right? I guess we are going to be talking about Jungle Book, and of course that's a book from that time. Like the Jungle Book by Kipling was written 1894, The Heart of Darkness 1899, Tarzan is 1912, just a slightly later. Another book which I feel like is being referenced a lot is actually a book of poetry by a guy called Hilaire Belloc, who was basically just a fascist. And he has this poem about what it's like to be the colonizer and to be so much more powerful than those natives and to have the Maxim gun, right? So these machine guns.
Okay.
And like the quote, the essential quote from the poem is, "Whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not." And so the colonizers, they can, like, whatever conflict breaks out, we have the machine gun, we press the button and we can just deal with the natives. And actually that image of just a simple machine gun that just sprays bullets over the natives is in almost all of these movies. At least it's in Avatar, of course, once they do the bombing run. It's in Tarzan very much in the climatic scene. It's also in Apocalypse Now.
1886 model Maxim machine gun. This is way better than my Walker Coats.
And also, what's also in most of these movies that you mentioned, you have nature fighting back, right? In Avatar, you have the birds and the rhinos, and in Tarzan you have the alligators and other animals. So it's like nature itself is fighting back against society, which is figuratively, right? We haven't been able to truly colonize the jungle as we did like other parts of this earth. Okay, let's go to the Jungle Book.
Yep.
This is a jungle. When you say the law of the jungle, this is quite literally, there's a law of the jungle.
Hunting at the riverbank was now forbidden because, by law of the jungle, drinking comes before eating, so you could come to the Peace Rock on a day like this and find all people side by side.
Which is un-jungle-like. This is very civilized. When there's a drought, there's a truce when you go and you drink the water. And nobody breaks the truce, not even the big bad tiger Shere Khan.
Sure.
So that's like not very jungly. This is in the not the animated version, right? In the CGI, whatever version.
Oh, sure. But this is the kind of law that the colonizers of the time really liked. I mean, this is not a democratic law. This is not a law that's somehow debated and voted on in the parliament. This is the kind of law of, well, we have different classes with different, people, but on animals at different stations in lives. There's the predators, sort of the nobility, and there's the prey, the serfs.
Yeah.
And we all stay in our own area, and look what a nice, stable, feudal society we now have.
Yeah. But they also have PC. Like when Mowgli is there, like all the parents of the animals say, "Don't stare at him, don't look at him. Well, no, don't say this out loud. He can hear you. You're being racist. Come on, what's he gonna think about me?"
He's walking on two legs. Don't stare.
So how is the Indian jungle different from the South American jungle, whatever, the Yucatan jungle, and the African jungle?
This is a little bit further to the north, further away from the equator, which means it's a little bit drier.
So the reason that it's a jungle is because of the Himalayas and the rainy season that they have over there. This is how this part is so far north. It's still so rainy because they have the altitude. It gets stuck. The clouds get stuck in the Himalaya and then come back.
There's a bit of that, but also there's, the opposite. It is further away from the equator than the Congo, and so it is drier than the Congo. So there's actually a drought here, right?
Ah, right. There's a drought actually in this movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Heat crept through the jungle, turning it yellow, then brown, then black. But that year was the driest season that anyone could remember. Even the moa didn't flower.
And there's the fires, right?
Okay, talk about the fire. The fire as representing a civilization, I guess.
Yeah, the fire represents civilization. The fire also represents Mowgli being a kind of a figure like Prometheus, right? So he has the knowledge. He brings the knowledge into the forest. He brings the fire into the forest, just like Prometheus. And of course, then he upsets the balance, and he shouldn't have done that. Although he ends up winning, of course, beating Shere Khan. But of course, he should have stayed out. He should have never been there, of course.
Right.
Yeah. So there's one thing that is a very, very obvious reference to Apocalypse Now, which is the great big orangutan in the temple.
You think that's
the way he is filmed, the way he moves, and you hear him talk, and you see him half in the shadows. That's exactly like Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now.
You know who I am?
No.
I am the king of the Badalag. Call me Louis.
So the orangutan being Christopher Walken could also be a reference because it's a little bit like he's good at playing crazy people, whatever, hallucinating and being out there. Could be a reference to Brando as Kurtz, right? Being
Absolutely.
Weird and
also him being sort of worshipped like a god by the other monkeys.
Yeah,
it's totally Kurtz. But also
nice.
Just the way he's filmed and the way he lords it over the rest there in the temple. That is completely Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, nice. I didn't think about it. So basically, the whole event that sets the whole story in motion is that the human in the jungle is in danger. Again, the jungle is dangerous for humans. This is not your place. You have to go outside of the jungle where the humans live. So, because this is dangerous for you, but it's dangerous for the jungle because once the red flower gets loose, then it will destroy everything. So basically, it's about the segregation. Humans outside the jungle, animals stay in the jungle, separate but equal.
Yeah, but all these movies, except maybe Apocalypto, are very racist. So in the other movies, there's the indigenous people who are closer to nature, and then there's the white man who intrudes. Mm-hmm. And in the Jungle Book, it's the animals who are anthropomorphic, who are basically the indigenous people, and then Mowgli is like the white man, the intruder. So it's like it's switched up a little bit, but It's basically the same story. Like there's those natives who, isn't this nice? They live in this sort of idyllic, a natural way, and we mustn't disturb that because oh my God, aren't they happy? With all the diseases and pathogens and tribal warfare and all the rest. We, the colonizers, the Europeans, are kind of a different sort, more advanced, and therefore in some way dangerous. We have tricks.
Right, like Mowgli has tricks. Okay, so let's go to the best movie of the bunch, Apocalypse Now, which I just finished watching today, and this is actually just my second time watching this movie. And both times I watched the director's cut. I didn't know that this one was the director's cut until it was over. I saw this was like 3.5 hours. Like the original movie is 2.5 hours. So I don't even know what the original version is like. But this basically is a story about how the further you get away from civilization and into the jungle, morality you lose grip on morality, on reality, on your duty, on who you are, what's your purpose, what's your mission. Martin Sheen has this mission. He goes on a mission. By the end, he doesn't even know why he's doing it, and this was the last mission that he will ever do. And there's actually, do you know that there's an Iron Maiden song about this movie?
No, I did not know that.
It's called The Edge of Darkness. They have a song about the book Dune. They have a song in the same album of The Edge of Darkness. It's the X Factor album. It's the only album without Bruce Dickinson. It's with Blaze something when he was doing hiatus. They have a song in the same album about Lord of the Flies.
Oh.
They have about the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas in the movie about in this album.
Excellent movie, by the way. Yeah.
Excellent movie, an excellent song, I must say. All the songs that I mentioned now, even though it's funny, it's also...
But they're all about the savagery, aren't they? Because Falling Down, there he slowly loses his humanity. Lord of the Flies also very much. The kids lose their humanity, and actually that would have been another good story to have in this podcast.
Right. Okay. So Lord of the Flies, again, when you take people away from society, they just go crazy. Again, morality, who's on the in group, who's on the out group, how do you make decisions? This is the law of the jungle. We should have thought about that. Okay.
Pretty soon you're chopping off heads again and putting a pig's head on the stick. That's where you're headed once you enter into the jungle.
There isn't anyone to help you. Only me. And I'm the beast.
Simon's mouth labored, brought forth audible words. Pig's head on a stick.
Fancy thinking the beast was something you can hunt and kill,
said the head.
So what did you think about Apocalypse Now? Super intense.
It's one of my favorite movies. So the first time I watched it, this was in high school. And back then, it was just about the time that the Vietnam movies were kind of fashionable, right? So now we're talking like the first half of the 1990s. And there was a bunch of these movies coming out. But that was not the director's cut. And then later I watched the director's cut. And now this time for the podcast, I also watched this one.
So what's the difference?
So the main difference is the whole French scene is not in the other one.
Nothing about the French there.
Nothing about the French. And then some other bits, I think, are maybe a little bit shorter here and there. But that meant, I think the Playboy Bunny scene
that was horrible.
Is shorter, I think. I'm not sure.
Oh, my goodness. Like they're raping, like they're selling the women.
We're slowly going upstream, and just the rules gradually change, you know?
Plus, we gotta fill that thing up with gas.
I know, man. We gotta pop by the department store, pick up the mattress. And I want to get a nice one, too. You know what I'm saying?
The what? The mattress? What do we need a mattress for?
What do you mean, what do we need a mattress for? Why in the hell do you think we just spent all that money on a boat? The whole purpose of buying the boat in the first place was to get the ladies nice and tipsy topside so we can take them to a nice, comfortable place below deck and, you know, they can't refuse because of the implication.
Oh, okay. You had me go in there for the first part. The second half kind of threw me.
Well, dude, think about it. She's out in the middle of nowhere with some dude she barely knows. You know, she looks around her. What does she see? Nothing but open ocean. There's nowhere for me to run. What am I going to do? Say no?
Okay, that that seems really dark.
No, it's not dark. You're misunderstanding me, bro.
I think I am.
Yeah, you are. Because if the girl said no, then the answer obviously is no.
No.
But the thing is she's not gonna say no. She would never say no because of the implication.
Now, you've said that word implication a couple of times. What implication?
The implication that things might go wrong for her if she refuses to sleep with me. Now, not that things are gonna go wrong for her, but she's thinking that they will.
But it sounds like she doesn't want to have sex.
Why aren't you
with
understanding this?
I don't.
She doesn't know whether she wants to have sex with me. It's that
she doesn't know.
That's not the issue.
Are you going to hurt women?
I'm not going to hurt these women.
Okay.
Why would I ever hurt these women? I feel like you're not getting this at all.
I'm not getting it.
God damn.
And the only guy that didn't want to change the rules was the chief of the houseboat, of the boat, not the houseboat.
Yeah, no, he tries to keep his humanity, and then of course that fails in this. All of a sudden, he gets a spear through him, and like it's like the sudden thing from trying to keep it together all this time, and then boom, and then he says a spear, and that's it.
I never thought that I would be killed by a spear.
Yeah, it's so weird.
And Lawrence Fishburne also there, getting shot. Looking like he's like a 16-year-old.
Do the right thing, stay out of the way of the bullets, and bring your honey home, all in one piece, because we love you very much. Love, Mom.
So here civilization is weapons, napalm, bullets, everything. This is what the white man brings to the jungle.
And surfing.
And surfing, right.
Charlie, don't surf!
And the contrast, so classical music, this is like the height, like the cliche, whatever height of, European creation and intelligence and all that. We just bring death and destruction, and it's contrasted in the scene when you go suddenly cut and go to the Vietnamese school, and it's just like super quiet, minding their own business, just because he wants to surf.
I don't think Wagner is the best example of really civilized high culture. I mean, Wagner and the whole Nibelungen cycle and the whole ritual in Bayreuth is very Nazi-esque.
We're coming low out of the rising sun, and about a mile out we'll put on the music. Music? Yeah, use Wagner. It scares the hell out of the slopes. My boys love it.
But they have also an opera there, which I didn't recognize. I thought it was just like meant to say, so we think that we are more civilized, this is our civilization, but we just love the smell of napalm in the morning. And then Duval, he says,
someday this war's gonna end.
That's it. That's the end of the sentence.
He says it with slight dismay in his voice.
Yeah,
maybe someday the fun's gonna end.
Oh my goodness! But he's very nice to the woman and her child, and he wants to give water to the guy that's dying. But then somebody distracts him, and he's like,
Any man brave enough to fight with his guts strapped on him can drink from my canteen any day.
Gives him water, and then somebody distracts him and tells him that the surfer is there. It's just moves, and the guy sees the guy on the ground. I want to drink.
But there's kind of like this regression, right? So that in that first step in the regression, the Duval character is a bit like the medieval knights or something like that. Like there's some sort of chivalry.
Yeah,
but clearly just mental, just idiotic, right?
Yeah.
And it just gets worse and worse from there.
Yeah, he also has like the cavalry, and the hat.
All that. Yeah, and the swords, like there's on the nose of the helicopters. There's also these sabers crossed.
Right, but when you get they slowly lose their grip on morality and whatever. Go back in time, and then by the end, it's like a god king warlord who just kills people for no reason with his own death wish cult thing going on.
There's so many good performances in there. And one of them also that I think is very good is the Dennis Hopper character, the journalist, who is just totally wacko, right? And he loves it there in some way, and he's kind of like a disciple of Kurt.
The man's enlarged my mind. He's a poet, warrior in the classic sense. I mean, sometimes you'll say hello to him, right? And he'll just walk right by you, and he won't even notice you. And then suddenly he'll grab you, and he'll throw you in a corner, and he'll say, "Do you know that if is the middle word in life?"
Clearly, like in thrall of this very evil person.
Yeah, and like when he's told that he's crazy, the way that he protests is as if he knows that he's crazy, but he's trying to persuade himself. No. It's not like he's like the first time that he heard of it. It's like, what? Crazy? No. What did? So there was like an inner battle going inside his mind that was very interesting for such a small role. Basically, breathed a lot of life into that small role.
Yeah. The Kurt's character, played by Marlon Brando, really represents this figure, almost like this Superman in the Nietzsche kind of sense, like completely loose from all the constraints and just acting autonomously without any further influences from outside. He there's no consideration for anything.
No inhibitions. Nothing.
No inhibitions. And that goes a little bit further than the original Kurt story, I think, right? Like in the original Heart of Darkness, it's more like this warning against the colonialism and look what these Europeans are doing once they are in cultures where they sort of have more reach and they just go crazy. But this is a bit more...
It's as if this craziness allows introspection because he reads these articles, news articles that are obviously detached from reality and crazy and insane in their own rights, just like they're according to the roles and to the language that is accepted in society, whatever. Look what the president says. He says this and that, and it smells better, and it's just like all baloney. So it's like, who's actually crazy? The fact that you are crazy doesn't mean that the people that are saying that you're crazy are not crazy too.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I was trying to say that, something like that.
I piggybacked on that. And one of the best scenes is just like when they're getting to the end of the road, the end of the river, and you start seeing all these people with white face paint and body paint. And it's just like one shot, just like continuous, like 1-2 minute shot, and you just like slowly get closer to them and like, what is going on in this place? So this is again, going back in time, whatever, to the cradle of civilization. People are just all face paint, body paint, just looking at you as if you don't know they're alive, they're dead. Do they have like their own agency and thoughts and feelings, or are they like one giant mass of you don't know what's going on? It's just it's become a psychedelic, kind of foreshadowed with a score, with the soundtrack at the beginning, right? This is the end by the Doors. And, there was another song right after that, a little bit psychedelic, like ooh, what's reality, what's everything.
I suppose there's one thing to explain real quick. It turns out that there's 2 movies in the 5 that we're watching, and both of them have the word apocalypse in them.
Right, okay.
But for totally unrelated reasons. At first I thought, there must be something meaningful, symbolic that we can make out of this. No, not really.
Yeah,
so
maybe there is.
Apocalypse, right? Well, so apocalypse, it actually doesn't necessarily mean something super disastrous. I mean, that is the connotation that it's taken on. But an apocalypse is basically unveiling or revelation, right? Lifting the veil on something. In Apocalypto, Mel Gibson means like lifting the veil in terms of like there's a new beginning, there's a new revelation, which is actually the arrival of Christianity to the natives in Yucatan. That's how he explained the title of the movie.
Okay.
And then Apocalypse Now is actually just a play on words, because so the first ideas for the movie were kind of conceived like at the tail end of the 60s, early 70s. And at the time, one of the slogans in the hippie culture was Nirvana now, like we can reach enlightenment right now by taking drugs. Mm-hmm. And so then the play on words was that this goes completely in the dark, opposite direction of not Nirvana, but apocalypse. But it's basically unrelated to the title of the other movie. It's pure coincidence.
The way that I see it, and obviously once a creation is out there, we can, each of us, like Mel Gibson doesn't have a precedent over me in terms of, or anybody in terms of thinking what it means. Apocalypto, I don't know, he didn't choose that by accident, because afterwards there was an apocalypse. And maybe Apocalypse Now is more like an apocalypse of the soul, of the individual in the war, and also kind of an apocalypse on the population, the population there. And we didn't mention the written directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Written also, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. Our next endeavor together will be indigenous people in movies, history in movies. Some of them we're going to talk about some of the movies that we talked today, but from a more human civilization perspective, and add some other movies. I think Dances with Wolves has to be there.
Sure. Yeah. But do we have some final conclusions?
Okay, final conclusions.
First, so nature near the equator is untamed and very dangerous, but with technology and Western ingenuity, we can finally make it work and monetize the riches that are in the earth there. I think that's the conclusion.
I have a different conclusion. I'd say that from these movies, that nature near the equator is untamable and unobtainable, and the only way that we can control it, we can't control it. And if we try, the only thing that we can do is destroy it. Just destroy it. It's not, it's different from like the high altitude mountains that we also can control, but there's barely any life there, so it's not that appealing. Like 50% of animals or something of life on Earth is in the jungle, something like that.
I don't think we really know, but let's say for the sake of argument, sure.
Like a lot of there's more life there than in other climates. And Absolutely. If we want to control it, we have to burn it, like in Brazil, or chop it down. You can't. The way that it's set up, it's like it's not fit for civilization as it is. You can live in it if you accept the rules of the game, but you can't bring your city, urban, semi-urban kind of thinking and try to apply that in that habitat. No, you can't. So don't even try, people. Don't even try.
So the encounter, therefore, descends into brutality.
Yes. And this is the only place other than islands, remote islands, where you have small civilizations totally detached from the rest of the world, don't know anything about electricity, about the internet, don't know anything. In Brazil, right, and some places in India, also in East India. And this is not by accident that you don't have these many people, remote civilizations in the mountains or in the desert, because it's easier to get there and to take control of what you got. Okay, so thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Rutger. That was very interesting. So if you enjoyed this episode, go to patreon.com/GothAcademy or click on the link for the PayPal contributions. That will go a long way. And also share with your friends, tell your friends, check out, if this is your first time here, follow and check out our previous episodes about science or about history and all kinds of other stuff. And we'll see you all next time. Bye, Rutger.
Educated man from the motherland. You see, they call me a star, but that's not what I am. I'm a jungle brother, a true blue brother, and I've been to many places you'll never discover. Step to my side, suckers run and hide. Africa's in the house, they get petrified. You wanna know why? I'll tell you why. Because they can't stand the sight of the jungle. They never fight a fuss, they never curse or cuss. They just stand on the side and stare at us. They get out of line, I put them on a vine and give them one big push for all mankind. There ain't nothing to it, I just go ahead and do it. I lay down the jungle sound and run right through it. And when I'm on the mic, I never stutter or stumble, cause I'm a jungle brother, straight out the jungle.